Good morning, guys. We're going to go ahead and get started with lesson 24. Lesson 24 deals with percentages. Some things to go over before we start. Just remember that percent means out of 100. Okay, so today's objective means I can understand that percents are related to part to whole ratios and rates where the whole is 100. I can model percents and write a percent as a fraction over 100 or a decimal to the hundreds place. Okay, so we're going to be looking at different models, or we're going to have to model some certain percentages. Remember, percentage is always out of 100, okay? Always out of 100. So let's go ahead and move on. Exercise 1 says, Rob's fruit farm consists of 100 acres on which 3 different types of apples grow. On 25 acres, the farm grows Empire apples. McIntosh apples grow on 30% of the farm. The remainder of the farm grows Fuji apples. Shade in the grid below to represent the portion of the farm each type of apple occupies. Use a different color for each type of apple, creating a key identity which color represents each type of apple. Okay, so for the Empire apples, I'm going to use red. And the Empire apples occupy 25 acres on the farm. Okay, so Empire is going to be red, and it's going to occupy 25 acres. So I'm going to shade 25 out of the 100 boxes. Okay. And this is for Empire apples. Okay, the McIntosh grow on 30% of the farm, which means I need to shade 30 of those apples, or 30 of those squares, and I am going to use green for McIntosh. Okay, there's 30 shaded there. And now it's telling us the remainder of the farm grows Fuji apples. Okay, I'm going to use yellow for Fuji. And it's going to occupy the remainder of the farm, which is 45%. Okay, 45 out of 100. Okay, so now we are done. Now we are done shading in the 10 by 10 grid. So we need to fill out the part to whole ratios. So looking at the Empire, how many total squares are there? Well, there's 100 because it's a 10 by 10 grid. And the Empires occupy 25% of that 100. So our part to whole ratio is 25 to 100. McIntosh was 30% of the farm. So our part to whole ratio would be 30 to 100. The Fuji apples occupied 45% of the farm, so our ratio would be 45 to 100. And realize that the part to whole means whatever part you're dealing with. In this case, it was Empire, McIntosh, and Fuji apples. And the whole to the whole, which is how many total boxes there are. In this case, there's 100 because it's a 10 by 10 grid. And percentage is out of 100. Okay, let's move on to exercise 2. Exercise 2 says the shaded portion of the grid below represents the portion of a granola bar remaining. Okay, so they have a granola bar, someone took a bite, and the shaded part is what's left after the bite. So what percent does each block of the granola bar represent? What does each one of these tiny little boxes represent? There's 100 units, 100 boxes, okay? What does each of them represent? They each represent 1%. And that's how you write 1% as a decimal. 100th, okay? 0.01. That equals 100th. 100th equals 1%. So what percent of the granola bar remains? Well, there's 8 rows with 10 in each row. So that is 80%. What other ways can we represent this percent? Okay, we can represent it as a fraction, which would be 80 over 100. 80 are shaded, there are 100 total, so 80 over 100. As a decimal, 80% as a decimal is going to be 0.8 or 0.80. Okay, either one is correct. 8/10 or 8/100 are both equal to 80%. Now, looking at this fraction, can we simplify that fraction? We can. We can divide both by 10, which would give us 8/10. That also represents 80%. We can divide that by 2 and get 4/5, which also represents 8/10. Okay, and I'll show you why 4/5 is equal to 80%. I have 4/5. Percentage is out of 100, so I'm going to compare it to 100. I have to look at the denominator. What am I doing to 5 to get 100? Well, I'm multiplying by 20, so I have to do that to the top as well, which gives me 80 over 100, which is 80%. Okay? Let's go ahead and move on. Okay? So, it says for each figure shown, represent the gray shaded region as a percent of the whole figure. Write your answer as a decimal, fraction, and percent. So let's look at letter A. Okay, how many are shaded out of 100? Well, there's 2 rows of 10, so 20. This is 20 over 100, which equals 20%. Okay, now we have it listed as a fraction and a percentage. How would we write that as a decimal? 20%, 20/100, 0.2 or 0.20. Okay, let's look at letter B. I know one side's a little lighter than the other, but they all should be shaded the same. Okay, so looking at this, it looks like half of the boxes are shaded, so this would be 50%. How we would write 50% as a fraction would be 50 over 100, okay? And 0.50 would be the decimal, or just 0.5, okay? Let's go ahead and move on. Letter C. Okay, we need to count all the boxes. Do that real quick on your own. You can pause the video. Try to give me the percentage, the decimal, and the fraction of what the shaded area represents. You should have paused the video and attempted to give me the information for this 10 by 10 grid. There are 48% shaded, okay? 48% as a decimal is 0.48, 48/100. And as a fraction, it is 48 over 100. Okay? So, just some tips to remember. Percentage is always out of 100. The shaded area is the part, 100 is the whole. We have to put the part over the whole, okay, and convert those to fractions and to decimals as well, okay. So we're going to fill these tables out. It says each relationship below compares the shaded portion, the part, to the entire figure, the whole. Complete the table. So they give us the percentage 6% and the ratio 6 to 100. Now we need to figure out the decimal and the fraction. Well, if you're thinking 0.6, you are incorrect, because 0.6 is equal to 60%. Okay? So 6% is 6 out of 100, so it's going to be 6/100. So we need to put a 0 and put the 6 in the hundreds place. Okay? And as a fraction, it's going to be 6 over 100. Okay? Now let's move on to 60%. Now, 60% as a decimal is 0.6 or 0.60. Okay? And as a fraction, it would be 60 over 100. Okay? Now, it went from 6% to 60, now to 600%. Okay, so 600% as a decimal is only going to be 6. Okay? Because one whole equals 100%. So if I have one whole pizza, I have 100% of that pizza. If I have 600% of pizza, that means I'm going to have 6 whole pizzas. Okay? And how we would write this as a fraction would be 600 over 100, or just 6 over 1. Okay? Hopefully that made sense. Just remember, 100% is one whole. So if you have anything more than 6 or 100%, it's going to be more than a whole. So if you have 600%, that's 6 wholes. Okay? Let's look at 32%. 32% as a decimal is going to be 0.32, 32 hundredths, and 32 over 100 as a fraction. The part to whole ratio would be 32 to 100. Let's look at the next row. All they're giving us is the decimal 55 hundredths. So 55 hundredths as a percentage is 55%. 55 hundredths as a fraction is going to be 55 over 100, and the part to whole ratio is 55 to 100. Okay? Now they give us 9/10. 9/10. So for this, remember, percentages out of 100. This is a simplified version of it, so we have to round up. So we have to scale up. So if I have 100 in the denominator, what am I doing to 10 to get 100? Well, I'm multiplying by 10. So I have to multiply 9 times 10, which gives me 90 over 100. Now I know what 90 over 100 is. That is 90%. And 90 over 100 is 90 hundredths, which means as a decimal, it's 90 hundredths. And the part to whole ratio would be 90 to 100. Okay? Now, all they're giving us is this box on the last row. There's 7 shaded out of 10. So 7/10. Okay? As a fraction, that would be 7/10, or 70 over 100. Okay, remember, percentages out of 100, so we always scale up if the number in the denominator is less than 100. Okay, so this would be 70%, 0.70 or 0.7. Okay, and the ratio would be 70 to 100. Okay. The lesson summary tells us percent means out of 100. Therefore, percents are fractions with a denominator of 100. We can create models of percents. One example would be to shade a 10 by 10 grid. Each square in a 10 by 10 grid represents 1% or 100th. Okay, just remember, percentage is always out of 100. You can scale up when the number's less. So if I have 4 over 25, okay, to figure out this percentage, I could put this over 100. So 25 times 4 equals 100. So I have to multiply 4 times 4, and that would give me 16 over 100. So that would be 16%. Okay. The problem set we can do on our own. Okay. It says, together, Marissa just bought 100 acres of land. She wants to grow apples, peach, and cherry trees on her land. Color the model to show how the acres can be distributed to each type of tree. Using your model, complete the table. So we're going to do the problem set together and try to figure this out. So we need to distribute the land to three different types of of fruit trees. So I have apples for number 1, peach for number 2, and cherry for number 3. So for apple, I am going to do 30%. Okay? So I'm going to shade in red 30% of the 10 by 10 grid. This represents the farm, which is 100 acres, as apples. Okay? And then peaches, I'm also going to do 30%, and I'm going to do peaches in orange. Okay? So 30% of my farm is shared to apples, and 30% is for peaches. Now, the rest of the farm is going to be for cherries. I'm going to do that in pink. Okay. And the rest of the farm equals 40%. Okay. So now I evenly distributed, or not evenly, but I distributed the 100 acres of land between the 3 different types of trees. Now I can complete my table. Apple, 30% for apples as a fraction would be 30 over 100, and the decimal would be 0.30. The peaches would also be 30 over 100 and 0.30. The cherry trees, 40% as a fraction would be 40 over 100 and 0.40. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope that you understand. If you're confused, watch the video again, or send me some comments as a question for anything that you're confused about. Remember, percentage is out of 100, always, okay? We can scale up if the number is smaller like we did here. So continue to ask questions if you need help. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.